Welcome to the Vergecast, the flagship podcast of interest clusters. I'm your friend David Pierce, and this is the third and final episode in our series all about AI in the real world. We talk a lot about AI right now, including obviously on this show all the time, but it somehow all feels really abstract and big and kind of jargony and technical most of the time. So we wanted to find some places where AI is actually showing up in our real lives. So far, we've talked about using AI as a tool to give everyone perfect memory, and we've talked with an artist who uses AI to make us think differently about privacy and surveillance and life itself. Today, I want to talk about movies, and more specifically, why it's so hard to figure out what to watch. This is a problem incredibly familiar to anyone who gets their entertainment through streaming, right? You sit down, you turn on the TV, and then you spend somewhere between 2 and 2,000 minutes looking for something to watch. No matter where you look, it's just stuff all the way down. So I open the Netflix app, and the first thing it shows me is Mucho Mucho Amor, The Legend of Walter Mercado, which I feel like, no thanks, probably not for me. No offense to Walter Mercado, I don't know who that is. Then we get my continue watching list, some new stuff on Netflix, top 10 shows, because I watched Girls 5 Eva, into that, binge-worthy TV shows. Today's top picks, for me, like 8 rows down, it's giving me personalized recommendations. Then we get some romantic favorites, my list, quirky TV shows, goofy sitcoms, your next watch, critically acclaimed TV shows. These all sound like the same thing. What are we doing here? I don't get it. Let's try something else. Okay, we go to Hulu. And Hulu starts by taking a long time to load. And then we get Dress My Tour. No chance that's for me. We get a bunch of live stuff. I don't really care. TV for me, which Dress My Tour again. Bunch of crime documentaries. That's my wife. House shows, sure. Then movies for me. Continue watching Emmy nominees because I watched How I Met Your Mother. Top shows, another recommendation for the same top show. Trending, newly added TV, full series comedies, newly added movies. These are like just things that Hulu has. None of this really feels like it's actually directed towards me at all. Okay, now we try Max. Max first shows me a CNN show, and then Hard Knocks with the New York Giants. That I will watch and will be very into. Recommended for me is up top. Appreciate that. Continue watching. Today's picks, which is actually Game of Thrones and Justice League and Kite Man and a spy documentary. This feels like me. Then a bunch of top 10s, live, true crime, designing home, just added. Okay, this feels closer to being me, but it's still just kind of like, here's a bunch of stuff that we have on Max. That's the vibe here. Like, do you want to watch this? Here's some things. Like I said, it's all a lot of stuff, but it doesn't feel like anything here is just telling me what to watch. And actually, this seems to me like the kind of thing AI ought to be able to do really well. It's low stakes in the sense that if the model doesn't recommend the objectively perfect thing, or if it even makes up a movie because these systems tend to make things up a lot, that's not a huge deal, right? I just want to be able to tell a chatbot what I want and get some recommendations. To be fair, there are actually lots of ways to do this already. You can do it with ChatGPT. What's a good movie that's kind of like Mission Impossible or The Bourne Identity, but isn't either one of those movies?
You might like Skyfall. It's a James Bond film.
I've seen all the Bond movies. What else?
In that case, you might enjoy The Man from UNCLE. It's a stylish spy film with plenty of action and a good sense of humor, similar to Mission Impossible and The Bourne Identity.
There are also a bunch of plugins in ChatGPT, the custom GPTs, that are explicitly designed for this, though they're mostly just kind of better formatting on top of the same answers. All right, I'm in Movies GPT, which calls itself a go-to movie encyclopedia. So I'll just do, I just watched Crazy Stupid Love and loved it. What's a similar movie I probably haven't seen? It says, if you enjoyed Crazy Stupid Love, you might like The 5-Year Engagement. This romantic comedy drama, directed by Nicholas Stoller, stars Jason Segel and Emily Blunt, follows the ups and downs of a couple's prolonged engagement, blending humor with heartfelt moments. The film explores relationship dynamics in a way that's both touching and funny, similar to Crazy Stupid Love. It's a pretty good answer. I'll take that. You can also use other AI systems like Google's Gemini. What are some classic 1980s action movies that I need to see?
The 1980s was a golden age for action movies. churning out some of the most iconic characters and quotable lines in cinema history. Here are a few classics you can't miss. Die Hard, 1988. Bruce Willis redefined the action hero with this game-changing...
Okay, yeah, we don't need to hear all that, but it recommends Die Hard, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Terminator, Predator, Beverly Hills Cop. And then it says this is just a small sampling of the many great action movies from the 1980s. Still, not bad. I don't know that I learned any new movies from that, but it's a decent start. These models will happily give you movie recommendations, and you can ask for them in pretty natural language, which is cool. So you don't have to just search for a movie or a genre. You can actually say, I want a romantic movie that's under 2 hours that is funny and not sad, and you get...
How about Crazy Stupid Love? It's a romantic comedy that's funny and heartwarming without being sad.
I just watched that. Great recommendation, but can you give me a different one?
Sure. How about 10 Things I Hate About You? It's a funny and charming romantic comedy, and it's just under 2 hours long. It's a modern take on Shakespeare's The Taming of the Shrew, and has a lot of great moments.
Not bad, right? It's not exactly groundbreaking new title ideas there, like Crazy Stupid Love and 10 Things I Hate About You you'd find in one Google, but they're good recommendations. And there's something important in that interaction, I think, that is actually a signal of why AI might be a big deal here. So for years, I've been asking people about recommendations. And for years, I've gotten roughly the same answers. Recommendations are hard to do really well. Really, really hard. And the most effective way we've found over time is to basically say, okay, you like this set of things, which we know because you've either rated them highly or watched them a bunch of times or done something else that makes us confident that you like them. Maybe you gave it a 5-star review. There are some other people out there who also like that same set of things. Oh, and they also like this other thing that you haven't seen. So we bet that you will like that thing too. It's simple. It's how recommendations worked forever, but it does kind of work. But AI has the potential to approach the problem really differently.
So there are two components that generally AI seems to be like a good tool to solve, right?
That's Diana Popescu, a developer and entrepreneur who recently started an AI movie recommendations tool called Movie Vanders.
We are pretty fans of Harry Potter after this, right? And we said, we were joking, saying, the movie has to choose you. It's not only that you are choosing a movie, right? So we said, oh, that sounds like the Ollivanders from, the wand is choosing you as a wizard. So we said, okay, magic plus that kind of concept. Movie Vanders sounds really good. This is how the name show up.
I love a Harry Potter name. But back to the two components. The first thing AI does really well is just ingest and organize data. So much data. All the genres and actor names and everything that you'd normally associate with a movie, but also all kinds of other stuff.
Every feedback that people is maybe giving in, Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, whatever, social media, we give more information than we think, right? Every click we are doing, it's information that goes somewhere and it's somehow interacting with other information and producing some kind of behavior that could easily be incorporated into an artificial intelligence to learn from.
The second component is that AI can begin to structure that data for you and turn all those articles and reviews and tweets and Reddit posts and everything else into something kind of like a usable database of information.
So if I'm saying, I want to see a movie that has a dog and it's not sad, please, because I'm a very sensitive person, and all these things, somehow that is interacting with the information that is already sort of flying in internet, and how those generative AIs are working, we are not exactly sure.
The reason Diana and others are excited about AI for making sense of all this information about movies and shows is that otherwise it doesn't really exist. And to explain what I mean, we have to talk a little bit about data and metadata. As I've talked to folks in this space over the years, I've learned that there are basically 4 useful kinds of information about a show or a movie. The first is the metadata, which is just information about the thing itself. Its name, who's in it, who directed it, the poster. That's the sort of stuff you can find on a search with IMDb. The second thing is watch data. The single best signal someone can give you about how they felt about something is how they watched it. Did they watch it all the way through? Did they turn it off right away? Did they watch it every night, 12 nights in a row? Did they get halfway in and then bail? That's all really, really useful information. But that information doesn't exist at any real scale, at least not for streaming services. And it definitely doesn't exist publicly. Netflix knows what you do on Netflix, Hulu on Hulu, Max on Max, Peacock on Peacock, but they don't know about all the others. And watch data, even those lists of most popular titles that you see from these services sometimes, is as a result a very closely guarded secret. It's crucial data and no one wants to share it. The third thing is just stuff to recommend. This is sort of an underrated one, honestly, and not really an AI story at all. But the recommendations you get are only going to be as good as the stuff there is to recommend, right? Even if you know exactly what I'll like, it only matters if you have that thing to offer me. And most streaming services have a few thousand shows and a few thousand movies, and honestly, sometimes not even that. And in theory, even if someone did have the whole available library of TV and movies ever, it's not a very big library. IMDb's library includes 685,000 movies and 265,000 TV shows, which is a lot. It's more than you'll ever watch in your life, but it is nothing compared to the amount of content being uploaded to TikTok and YouTube and Instagram Reels every single day. The fourth piece of information about movies and shows that matters, and maybe the hardest and maybe the most interesting for AI, is what you might call traits. Deep information about the thing itself. Not just who's in it or whether it's a comedy or a thriller, but 1 or 2 or 3 levels deeper than that. Is it a sad movie or a happy movie? Does it move fast or does it move slow? Does it take a while to get into or does it capture you right away? Is the soundtrack awesome or does the soundtrack kind of suck? Is it a good movie to watch while you're looking at your phone? Is it a good movie to fall asleep to on the couch? Is it a movie you should only see in theaters? This stuff really matters, and it's information about the title that is hard to know unless you really understand the thing itself. I think the easiest way to understand what that might look like in practice is through music, which has actually gotten a lot of this stuff really right. Back in 2021, I interviewed Gustav Soderstrom, who is now the co-president of Spotify, about the company's recommendation system. He actually described the whole idea of it kind of perfectly.
If you actually have non-real time, if you have time-shifted on-demand content, then you have the benefit of actually being able to machine listen to the content, transcribe it, and understand it. Then the problem is actually quite similar to text recommendation, if you think about it. Then you have a few things. One big difference from music. In music, we had these 4.5 billion playlists where people had sat and manually organized the world's 70 million tracks into like how they go together. There is nothing like that for podcasts, and not even on the competitive platforms, right? So we kind of had to bootstrap it somehow. And so what we started with was to build what is called a knowledge graph, quite similar to an artist graph. Like this artist has this discography of these albums with these songs and, belong to these genres. So we started building a knowledge graph, a traditional knowledge graph quite early on before we had any listening data to bootstrap it. And then we started adding listening data to that. So we could see that people that listen to this also listen to that. So we started with actually a pretty simple system of a sort of hard-coded graph. And then after a while, now that we have lots of listening data, we started inferring with more machine learning-based techniques. Both the quote-unquote traditional collaborative filtering, people who listen to this also listen to that, which is kind of what the playlists were about. People who playlist this also playlist that. But we also started adding much more advanced techniques like actually machine listening to the context and summarizing them so that we can do things like podcast topic search. And there we're not just looking at the headline. We're actually listening to the content we're reading the content as transcribed, summarizing it, and then we put it into one of these embedding spaces, as they're often called, to understand how it's similar to other things.
That's the magic right there. That combination is where everyone seems to agree the best stuff happens. And when Gustav talks about machine listening, by the way, he's talking about technology that Spotify has that can actually break a song into its component parts automatically. So with that technology, Spotify's computers can recognize that the song is 110 beats per minute. It has a driving guitar line, there's a violin, a female lead singer, angsty vibes, and lots of other things. Tons and tons of different categories and classifiers for what this song actually is. And that actual understanding of what something is at a content level is really important in getting recommendations right. And that just hasn't existed in video before. It hasn't really even been possible. But then, just recently, something changed. We got to take a break, and then I'll tell you about it. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Let me tell you about an AI breakthrough. So in February of this year, Google launched its newest AI model. It's called Gemini 1.5. Gemini 1.5 was all the things that new AI models usually are: faster, smarter, does well on benchmarks, all that good stuff. But its big new feature was a new context window, which basically refers to the amount of information that the model can take in and consider at a time during a single query. So like one token is a few letters. Gemini 1.5 could do 1 million tokens. That's like a book. You could just feed a book all at once. Or, as in one demo that Google showed, it's a movie. The company demoed Gemini 1.5 with a 45-minute Buster Keaton movie called Sherlock Jr. The movie came out to 696,417 tokens, if you're curious. And just listen to how the demo goes.
In Google AI Studio, we uploaded the video and asked, find the moment when a piece of paper is removed from the person's pocket and tell me some key information on it with the timecode.
Then the whole thing processes for a minute, 57 seconds to be exact, and it answers.
The model gave us this response, explaining that the piece of paper is a pawn ticket from Goldman & Company pawnbrokers with the date and cost, and it gave us this timecode 1201. When we pulled up that timecode, we found it was correct. The model had found the exact moment the piece of paper is removed from the person's pocket, and it extracted text accurately.
I remember the first time I saw this demo and being totally blown away by it. This is an AI model processing an entire movie for the first time and identifying one thing inside of it in under a minute. There was one other demo in there also.
Next, we gave it this drawing of a scene we were thinking of and asked, what is the timecode when this happens?
The drawing is like a crude stick figure drawing of what I think is a water tower. Big round thing on 2 legs, person below getting sprayed by water. It's either a UFO abducting someone or a water tower. Anyway, here's how it goes.
The model returned this timecode, 1534. We pulled that up and found that it was the correct scene. Like all generative models, responses vary and won't always be perfect. But notice how we didn't have to explain what was happening in the drawing. Simple drawings like this are a good way to test if the model can find something based on just a few abstract details, like it did here.
This is obviously just a tech demo, and most things are not this easy and this perfect. But the possibilities with that idea are huge. Suddenly, we're heading towards a world in which you can upload a movie to an AI model, and that model can start to understand things about it. Granted, identifying a water tower is easier than figuring out the mood and vibe and pace of a movie, but this is still a big leap down that path. It is, by the way, a leap filled with copyright violations and complicated legal issues, but just for the sake of our episode today, I'm going to leave those to the side for right now. So much of what's coming in AI is going to be decided in court, but until that happens, this is what we're going to get. And this is where we come to the biggest, maybe thorniest question in the whole AI recommendations universe. What actually makes a good recommendation? And actually, no, there's a question even bigger. Why do you like what you like?
There's an example I always give for that one, which is The Crown. Like the first couple seasons of that, it was a great, I don't know why, but I loved it. It was great. But then I noticed on whatever streaming service it was on, it started to recommend British shows to me, or British royalty, which I have no interest in British royalty shows. There was something intangible, I don't know what, about the first couple seasons of The Crown that caught me. That's where it's trickier.
That's David Sanderson. He's the CEO of a company called Real Good. Real Good is one of those products that tells you where you can stream a given show or movie, but it's also becoming a really important data provider in the streaming industry. Like I mentioned earlier, there just is no good universal source of data about TV shows and movies, what they are, who's in them, who made them, and where you can find them. I know that sounds nuts, and it is, but it's true. That data just doesn't exist. So Real Good has its own consumer product that you can use, but it's also the database behind a lot of the other streaming search providers out there. But think about that example, The Crown, or any other show or movie you like. Do you like it because of the star? Maybe, and maybe that means you'll watch anything with that person in it. That is an easy recommendation problem. But how do you account for someone liking Breaking Bad but not Better Call Saul, or being super into Selling Sunset but really only liking the first season? If you liked Game of Thrones, does that mean you'll like House of the Dragon or any other show that has dragons? Or was it the palace intrigue that you liked, or just the naked people, or one of the actors but not any of the other actors? Or did the thing with the Starbucks cup make you like it, or something else entirely? Like they say, there is no accounting for taste. But frankly, I hate that. And I want AI to fix it for me. So Real Good has been experimenting with AI a lot recently, mostly as a way to try and explain whether you might like something. It's less proactive recommendations and more a way of you saying, I'm interested in this. Do you think I'm going to like it? In their app, you go to a title and you tap on the icon, and it takes a couple of seconds based on what it knows about you to analyze whether you're likely to enjoy it. All right, so I'm in the Real Good app, and one of the recommendations it has for me is Eric, which I've never heard of before. Vincent, a grief-stricken father whose son goes missing, finds solace through his friendship with Eric, the monster that lives under Edgar's bed. Sure, that's something. It looks like Benedict Cumberbatch is in this. Anyway, I hit the button that says, should I watch this? And it says, it's analyzing it just for me. And it says, with its low IMDb audience score of 6.9 out of 10 and Real Good score of 79 out of 100, Eric may not be the best fit for you. However, the show's crime and drama genres align with your interests in mystery and drama. The show's suspenseful storyline about a father's search for his missing son could keep you engaged, but the monster under the bed element might not be to your liking. And then if I hit a button that says suggest similar, it just shows me a bunch of other things that I may or may not like, including The Bear and Presumed Innocent and Sunny and House of the Dragon, all of which I very much do like. So maybe I need to watch Eric. When you think about the 4 parts of recommendations, metadata, watch data, stuff to watch, and traits, Real Good is a really interesting one. It has lots of metadata. That's the database it's been building for years. It has very little watch data because Netflix and the others don't share that. Real Good and every other platform like it, Just Watch and Likewise, and all these other recommendation systems are desperate for you to tell them which shows you like and which ones you've seen so that they can try and back into some of that watch data, but they'll just never have it like Netflix has it. On the flip side, Real Good has way more stuff to watch and more things to offer you because its library includes lots of streaming services. And when it comes to traits, actually understanding the content itself, well, that's complicated. Here's Pablo Alessia, who runs engineering and data for Real Good.
It's not the same thing as looking at a genre or a tag, right? It's a completely different problem. It's a way more holistic view of looking at, okay, what are the archetypes? For example, I've seen some analysis that's like made by actual people, like analysis of movies and shows where they're like looking at the archetypes and like the psychology of them. And that's really maybe the reason why we like movies, we like the archetypes of the characters. I mean, I would say LLMs are probably the best equipped at looking at problems like that, because you would need to look at such a breadth of like knowledge at the same time to be able to like do that analysis that humans do. But I would say that we're pretty far away from getting to that level of analysis.
Even in the best, most powerful scenario, Pablo says he's skeptical that we're going to be able to teach LLMs to completely, deeply understand movies and shows and also understand why people like them.
I know there's people that do. Like LLMs are the way humans think. I don't think that's the case, but let's say it is. Let's assume that for a second. We're still not like LLMs don't perceive the world in any way, shape, or form close to the way humans do, because we're giving them data in such a different way, and also the data that we give them is so limited and lacks so much context. Even if you give them 1,000 people, they're still individual 1,000 pieces. Like just imagine think of the way you watch movies and shows, right? It's such an emotional undertaking, right? You're like going through feelings as you're looking. It also depends on who you're watching the movie with and all this criteria that the LLM is not like, it's not that it needs to be smarter. It's just like lives in a box, right? Versus us who live in the actual world, right? So there's that part of the problem as well. That makes it a lot harder for us to get to that point.
Pablo also said he wonders how deep it's actually useful to go down that rabbit hole. Like if a model knows that you like a movie and there happens to be a bird in the shot 4 minutes and 6 seconds into the movie, is that why you like the movie? No, obviously it's not why you like the movie. That level of detail is basically totally irrelevant for our purposes here. That is such a solution in search of a problem. But if level 1 of understanding is just title and genre and cast, there's maybe a level 2 that might be just as useful.
There's no right answer here, right? Like, this is like the one we use, but the one that we're looking at, and I think is the second level, is the mood of the piece of content. So if this is like in what mood the person is in when they want to watch this piece of content, that would be the second dimension and the one that we're most actively looking at right now because it's, I mean, somewhat solvable, right? Like you can go down the rabbit hole of like the archetypes of each character, but are we in a place where we can solve that quickly? Not at all. Versus moods, obviously, it's something much easier to actually tackle. So I would say that's the next dimension. So you go genres and tags, which are the ones we all know, like drama, serial killer, that sort of thing. So one's a genre, one's a tag, and then the next one would be the mood the person is in when they're watching that piece of content.
Notice that that's both about the mood of the content itself and your mood when you watch it. I hadn't really thought about it until Pablo mentioned it, but so much of the equation here, and really the reason recommendations are so hard in general, is that whenever I sit down on the couch to watch something, my mood changes everything. Yes, I like spy movies, but I don't always want a spy movie. And yes, I like historical documentaries and silly rom-coms, but God help you if you try to get me to watch a World War II documentary on like a Tuesday night when I just want to fall asleep watching a food show. You know what I mean? I feel like it's possible that recommendations will never be perfect and that they'll never know the exact right thing every time because I don't want the same thing every time. I'm human and the computer isn't, and that might always be a problem. So where does all that leave me in my quest to just find something great to watch? I'll get into that right after the break. Okay, we're back. Let's go back to Movie Vendors, that AI movie recommendation service we were talking about, just for a quick second. I asked Diana Popescu how people are using the service so far, and she said there are basically two things people are doing.
One is maybe you have already a movie in your mind, something some movie that you already seen. This is happening to me very often. And I know a lot of people like to rewatch movies that they've seen maybe years ago and they've enjoyed very much, but they don't remember the name. They do remember certain elements of the movie, like you said, right? It happened in New York. It had like the main character and stuff like that, right? So they put that in find that movie to me.
So they're looking for one specific movie, but they don't know what it is.
Exactly.
Okay.
They don't remember exactly the name, etc. So that would be the find me option. And then there is a recommender. Is like, I don't know exactly what I'm looking for. There's no specific movie that I want to see, but I would like to have certain elements in it. You can be as deep as you want, right? You can give, the better you formulate your request, the more specific is going to be that request, the better is going to be the outcome. So you don't have to fear that if I'm giving too many details, I'm not going to find anything. Because eventually you're going to be more accurate, if that exists, of course. I mean, you can search for some, like for instance, myself, I love, because I have a small kid and I like Cars movie. So I was thinking, I like Cars story. It's like pretty good. But I don't like the fact that the characters are cars. Is there any movie that has that kind of story, but without cars, like with people? And actually, the outcome from Movie Vendors was pretty good. I was like, oh yeah, sure, I want to see all those movies. They were explaining like what's the plot, and it was like, that's true. It is indeed. So that's a very deep type of question. It's like, I want this story, but not with cars, with people. And I was surprised to see like that level of understanding of the artificial intelligence, to the point where, I don't know, it did some comparison between plots and said, oh, there are common elements between these two movies.
That last thing is pretty impressive, actually, and very telling. If you go to Google right now and you just say, what are some movies like Cars but with people, you're either going to get nothing useful or like a link to the movie Cars. It'll probably be the movie Cars. But the idea of AI is that it can comb through all the reviews, all the synopses, all the tweets, and say, oh, this movie is talked about similarly to the way that people talk about cars, but it doesn't seem to have any cars in it. Maybe that'll work. That's the kind of thing that no system other than AI can do really well and do at scale. In the first case Diana mentioned, AI models are already actually pretty great. Frankly, for the same reason, because they've ingested all these recaps, reviews, and tweets and more, they can do a good job of guessing what you're looking for just by synthesizing information from all over the web. So when you're like, what's the Jim Carrey movie with the boat and the TV show? It gets to the Truman Show really fast. That's not recommendations so much, but it is pretty handy. Personally, I've been using these AI tools for more than a year to try and find stuff to watch, and I found a few tricks that really work. The first is the show me stuff like option. I'll add 3 movies I like and tell the model to find other ones like it. That works great, which actually makes sense. These models have ingested all those lists of best spy movies or whatever and can easily compare the summaries that you find on IMDb, so matching things to like things is actually pretty easy. But the problem is it'll usually spit back really obvious examples. If I like Back to the Future, Everything Everywhere All at Once, and So I Married an Axe Murderer, what other movies do you think I might like?
You might enjoy Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, Hot Tub Time Machine, and Scott Pilgrim vs. the World.
So in that case, what I'll do is add, but only recommend lesser known titles, or I'll ask only for underrated ones. And that usually weeds out some of the most obvious answers. If I like Ocean's 11, The Gentleman, and Heat, what are some underrated movies that you think I might like?
You might enjoy Layer Cake, Inside Man, and The Town. These films have strong heist.
I've seen all those. Give me more underrated examples.
Sure. How about A Simple Plan, The Bank Job, and The Way of the Gun? These movies have gripping stories and clever twists that should appeal to you.
Those are good, thank you. The other thing I do now is try and ask just for the vibes that I'm looking for. Like, here's one of my go-to prompts these days. Can you recommend a good rom-com that's ideally under 90 minutes and doesn't require much brain power?
Absolutely. Here's a perfect rom-com for you. Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, 2004. It clocks in at a breezy 84 minutes and is a lighthearted watch. It follows Rosalie, Kate Bosworth, a small-town video store clerk who enters a contest to win a date with the megastar Tad Hamilton, Josh Duhamel.
Is it any good?
Win a Date with Tad Hamilton is a classic rom-com that's more about charm than plot. It has predictable elements but is still enjoyable for its lighthearted humor and performances by Kate Bosworth and Topher Grace.
It kind of works. I don't know if these are like the platonic ideal of perfect recommendations, and a lot of these have been terrible movies, but I've had good luck with this so far. And as I said earlier, I like this use of AI because it's so low stakes. If it recommends a movie I've seen, I just tell it I've seen it and ask for another one. And actually adding that data to my search often gets better results. If it recommends a movie that doesn't exist, which to be fair has only ever happened to me once or twice in the last year or so, that becomes obvious very quickly and I just move on. I found a lot of good stuff to watch this way, and it's taken a lot of the aimless browsing out of my evenings. And I really appreciate it just for that alone. What it doesn't do well is match to the Just Watches and Real Goods and this like, what service can I do it on piece of things. So I have to get a recommendation and then go to another thing to find where I can actually watch it. But those are easy problems to solve. And things like Movie Vendors are actually starting to put those two pieces together. But after talking to lots of people about this, do you want to know my number one best recommendation? It's to do as much of your watching as possible on as few services as possible. Because the thing I heard from every single person that I talked to is that the best predictor of what you're going to watch next is what you've watched before. If you want great recommendations, you need a watch history. This is why YouTube and TikTok have such better recommendations, because they know what you've watched. You watch a lot, you watch it very quickly, and these systems are able to just build this internal flywheel of what you do and don't like in a way that is much harder when you're sprinkling viewing across 10 different streaming services. If you have the energy and diligence, which I frankly don't, maintaining your profile on something like Real Good or Just Watched or Letterboxd, where you can keep track of everything you've watched everywhere, is also an excellent path towards good recommendations. That stuff serves itself. The more data you put in, especially with these strong signals of high reviews and saying you loved something and all that stuff, that matters a lot. I think eventually we might get AI that understands us as people and understands movies and shows in a deep and rich way, and does, in fact, recommend the perfect thing, or at least the perfect handful of things, every time we turn on the TV. But I get the sense that that's still a ways off. The Gemini 1.5 demo is a demo. That's not how we're going to start querying movies anytime soon, I don't think. For now, if you want Netflix or Peacock or whoever to find you something great, the best thing you can do on those services is watch stuff you like all the way through, over and over and over and over again. It sounds pretty low tech, but I gotta say, it's not the worst homework in the world. All right, that is it for the Vergecast today, and that is it for our AI miniseries. Thanks to everyone who was on the show, and thank you, as always, for listening. As always, if you have thoughts, questions, feelings, or movies that you want me to watch, because that is still the best recommendation system out there, you can always email us at vergecast@theverge.com or call the hotline, 866-VERGE11. We truly, truly love hearing from you. This show is produced by Andrew Marino, Liam James, and Will Poor, and this episode was edited by Xander Adams. The Vergecast is a Verge production and part of the Vox Media Podcast Network. We'll be back on Tuesday and Friday this week with our regularly scheduled programming. I'm actually out for the next 2 weeks, but we have some really fun stuff teed up for you. And also there is just a lot of news going on, so keep it locked. We'll see you then. Rock and roll.